Project Execute webinar entitled Extending Microsoft Project. My name is Ashton Vaughn, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. First, I'd like to thank y'all for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We know your time is very valuable and promise to have you back to work within 30 minutes. I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. You'll receive a half PDU for attendance at the webinar today. All you'll need to do is respond to the follow-up email we'll send out tomorrow and request your certificate. We do ask that you allow 3 to 5 business days for us to get those back to you. Also, as a reminder, you can submit questions anytime online during the presentation via the Questions tab. I'll be collecting these as the presentation goes forward and reading them at the end during the Q&A. Our agenda today is very straightforward. First, James Bronner will go through the presentation, and then we'll begin responding to your submitted questions during the Q&A. So without further ado, let me hand you over to James.
Thank you, Ashton. Well, welcome. We're glad that you've spent your time with us today. We hope to provide you with some valuable information. I hope you're having a beautiful day today. I spoke with a colleague outside of Paris yesterday. They were locked in with a snowstorm. I talked to another colleague this morning in upstate New York. They too are in a snowstorm. But we're blessed to be in Austin, Texas, where it's mid-70s today and no snow here. So wish you could be here. Well, let's jump right on into our webinar today. In today's webinar, we're going to explore how to get even more out of the powerful and robust planning and scheduling capabilities of Microsoft Project and Project Server to help you and your organization achieve new levels of efficiency and productivity and provide your managers with accurate, up-to-date status for project coordination and cost control. So, without further ado, let's get right into exploring how we can extend the powerful capabilities of Microsoft Project. Well, Microsoft Project is, without a doubt, the world's most popular project management software. It is the industry standard when it comes to an automated project management software package. This is evident by the fact that A, at least one person using Microsoft Project can be most likely found in any project-focused organization. And B, every day it seems new software applications spring up as the next great alternative to Microsoft Project. Mimicry is, of course, the greatest form of flattery. As we're seeing a mainstreaming of project management, with it being taught standard in business schools, master's degree programs, and more people adopting project management processes, Microsoft Project continues to be the software that most new managers cut their teeth on. Is it the best solution out there? Well, there are numerous opinions on that, just like there are for everything else. But one thing is for sure, it's not going anywhere, and it'll probably continue to be the de facto standard. Of course, calling it a project management system is a bit of a misnomer. As any good PMP will tell you, project management is much more than just creating and managing a schedule. But that's what Microsoft Project does very well, is to create and manage schedules. Some of the many benefits that Project provides you include robust scheduling tool and task dependencies, baselines, critical paths where you can automatically calculate timing of your project and associated deliverables based on input. You're able to quickly recalculate in order to meet deadlines, changes in scope, etc. You've got a tracking Gantt, PERT charts, and other tools that allow you to keep your schedule in line and provide up-to-date to stakeholders. You got standard templates that allow you to get a head start on building your schedule. A number of tools within Project allow you to perform some very complex algorithms like filtering the tasks by various criteria or crushing the schedule, moving dates, dealing with contingencies, these types of things. And then when we talk about Project Server, you can do all the collaborative sharing of the enterprise across the organization. So given all that Microsoft Project and Project Server do, how would you improve on that? I'm sure everyone has used something like Google Maps at some point to get directions. I love Google Maps. I can enter a starting address, an end address, and it'll chart the route for me. I can even use the street view and find landmarks to help me find my way. I just plug in my addresses, get the approximate time it's going to take me, get in my car, and boom, I'm gone. It's great. I know exactly where I'm going. I know all the streets, the exits, the turns I need to make to get there, and I know how long it's going to take to do that. So off I go, and then I miss an exit. That never happens, does it? Or a road's closed. Traffic. It's all backed up. Now what? I've got my Google Maps route printed out, but that was essentially rendered useless when someone decided to send a text message doing 65 miles an hour down the highway, bringing traffic to a complete standstill. I will most assuredly miss my appointment if I continue on the route that I originally charted with Google Maps. And calculating the percent of my trip I've completed so far is helpful, but it's not going to help me get around traffic. Now, if I was using a GPS navigation system, it would be a completely different story, wouldn't it? Not only do I have the power of a charted route using my mapping software like I did with Google Maps, but now my plan is living. If I miss it'll recalculate my route and let me know what time I'm going to get there so I can still make my appointment. My plan now becomes an evolving one. In the variables that I apologize, we seem to be having some technical difficulties. Let me back up just a minute here. If I were using a GPS navigation system, it would be a whole different story, wouldn't it? Not only do I have the power of the charted route using the mapping software like I did with my Google Maps, but now my plan is living. If I miss an exit, take a wrong turn, or run into traffic, it'll recalculate my route for me and let me know what time I'm going to get there so I can still make my appointment. My plan now becomes an evolving one that helps factor in the variables that I was not able to account for by just using my Google Maps. Because my arrival time is also being calculated, I can call ahead and give a relatively precise estimate of when I'm going to arrive as soon as I know. When we're talking about Microsoft Project or Project Server and taking them to the next route, or to the next level, I should say, we're talking about taking it from a map to living navigation. You know, all of the cool things that Microsoft Project does, like Gantt charts and PERT charts and resource tracking, they become significantly less useful once the project gets going because you're not able to compare what is actually happening and use that to modify the plan to achieve the end goal of getting your project completed on time or within budget and within scope, whatever you need to do to get that there. So how do you take Microsoft Project from being a map to giving you turn-by-turn directions to project completion? Let's talk about some ways. A successful project management process requires doing two things really well: tracking the progress of your current projects and estimating your future projects more accurately. Both need accurate information about time spent on projects. You need to be able to track how much time is being spent on the tasks within your projects, along with how much longer it's going to take to complete that. Sometimes that's a more important piece of information, right? Is how much work is remaining. Project managers are responsible for keeping scope, budget, and schedules on track, yet how can they achieve that if they don't know how many hours it takes to accomplish a task, or more importantly, how many hours remain in the project? Not only that, but the management team is constantly asking project managers for status reports and accurate information on projects so they can make critical business decisions. The whole point of working on projects is to bring in a good return on investment, right? The only way to understand project profitability is to understand true project costs, which mainly involves the cost of labor. Tracking time to projects and tasks is therefore an inescapable requirement for measuring your project ROI. And this goes beyond just looking at percent complete, but tracking actual work. If 10% of the allocated budget has been spent and only 5% of the project work's been completed, there's a problem. Project managers who track employee actuals and find this out early in the project have a fighting chance of recovery. Those who don't will find out much later that their projects are over budget. This is just one example of how real-time data enables project managers to fix problems before they start and ensure a good return on investment. Integrating your project plans with actuals, actual work, actual costs will help you monitor and control your project progress. You need to have an easy and user-friendly way for your project team members to see what their assignments are, track their actual time to those assignments, and communicate how much longer it's going to take to complete. Your team members should be also able to record all their time in one place. Their organizational time, G&A, non-project time, time off, all in one spot. Many people feel that it's enough to track project progress on a % complete basis, but this is just not effective as it doesn't tell an accurate or complete story. It's not consistent as well with established methodologies, which suggest that the only accurate measure of progress is tracking work effort. For example, time. Remember, I can see that I'm 65% done with my trip to my appointment, but that doesn't help me avoid traffic. If I call my appointment and I say, well, I've got another 35% of my trip to go, what good is that? What I need to be able to say is I've got another 15 miles to go. It should take me about 22 minutes or so to get there. Tracking actual time, cost, and completion estimates helps me do that with my projects. And remember, you can't control what you don't measure. Connecting with resource management. You know, project teams are made up of people who are categorized by skill type or job functions. For example, a project team might require developers, team leads, project managers, architects, DBAs. You know, finding the right resource to assign to a project or task, making sure that that person is available, and communicating the assignment to them can be some of the most challenging problems confronting a project-centric organization. You know, in every organization, there are always those star players, the handful of folks who are overbooked. Everyone wants these resources working on their project. And every time one of those resources takes a vacation, comes down with the flu, the organization groans. Now, on the other hand, there are those people who are underutilized. You know, even when project managers understand resource availability, guess what? It changes. They might run around and get all the vacation schedules recorded in a big spreadsheet, only to find out a week later that it's all been shifted. Project managers need real-time access to team member schedules, their tasks, and available time in order to assign people to tasks more effectively. You know, Microsoft Project will show you resource usage, but it's also incomplete or siloed, meaning it's not a complete picture. You need to have complete visibility and insight into resource availability, which means you need to be able to see not just what projects a person is working on, but also factor in organizational initiatives, their non-project work, overhead time, when they're on vacation or taking leave. When you're scheduling a task, you need to be able to quickly find the person or people you're looking for, understand if they're available, and then easily assign them to that work. This not only allows you to assign people to tasks, manage their allocation, but it also allows you to minimize their time on the bench. But it also allows you to have insight into your capacity. So, you know that big project you've got coming up next quarter? Do you have the available resources to take on that work? By effectively managing your resources and gaining that valuable insight into resource availability, you'll be able to know. Effective status reporting. You know, no one wants to take time from their busy schedule to sit around and discuss what they're working on, how much is left, or how it's going. They just don't. Yet, this is necessary data for the project manager. If you have a way to have accurate data right at your fingertips, you can avoid those endless status meetings, and everyone can focus more on actually doing work and less on meetings. You know, it's impossible to make effective decisions when you don't know what people are working on or how the projects are doing. Also, strategic projects have got to have priority for critical, scarce resources. You know, as project managers, we just want to know what's broken or what's about to be broken, right? We're problem solvers, and we can't succeed with bad, late, or incomplete information. What's wrong, and what do I need to address? It's usually the first question on our minds at the start of every day. You need to be able to extract and analyze data. And the easiest way to do this is to have some sort of centralized reporting mechanism where each person can organize their data the way they want and produce the analytics they need in order to make the effective, informed decisions that are necessary. You also need to be able to have one pane of glass view into all your projects and resources. By having some sort of dashboard or other visual status indicators, you can easily and quickly see what you need to be concerned about. You know, many folks will ask, well, what about Project Server? You know, it has time tracking, resource management, and reporting. That's true. And you might be able to accomplish all of this using Project Server or EPM. But let's go back to our GPS navigation analogy for a moment. There are many navigation systems that will plot a course for you and give you turn-by-turn directions. When you come upon a closed road or traffic, you can reroute to your destination. However, there are some navigation systems that will actually give you real-time traffic and road closures. Heck, I've even traveled with someone in Europe who had one of those that pointed out speed traps. Unfortunately, I haven't seen that feature here in the States yet, but make sure and let me know if you hear of that. All of these things not only help you react to the unexpected, but also greatly increase your ability to avoid the problems altogether. Adding the above features, actual time and cost tracking, resource management, and real-time reporting in a way that enables you to factor in additional variables such as vacation, time off, small projects, service requests, non-project work, that can enable you to extend Project Server, allowing you to avoid problems altogether. Let me tell you a story of a company that I recently worked with. They were using Project Server to manage their projects. They could see resource allocation, and they could track their actual time. They could even enter in their vacation. At the same time, they had a lot of small projects that they called initiatives. These were those 3-day, 3-person projects. They had service requests and some other projects that were not part of their strategic project progress. All of these resided in their ERP system, Lawson. And of course, they needed to track time to those as well, so they did that also in Lawson. They also needed to track vacation and holiday in Lawson because that was their system of record for information. Tracking it in Project Server only gave them information as to when people would be out and unable to do their assigned tasks. And of course, most of their employees worked on a combination of formal projects in Project Server and organizational work over in Lawson. Guess what? They had 2 timesheets. Most people don't get excited about having to track their time at all in 1 timesheet, much less 2. And these 2 systems didn't even talk to each other. There was no resource tracking in Lawson, and what was in Project Server was incomplete as it didn't take into account what was over in Lawson. There was no resource tracking in Lawson, and what was in Project Server was incomplete. So reports had to be pulled out of each system. They had to be manually combined with the data and massaged. So in this company's case, Microsoft Project Server worked well and did everything it was supposed to do, but it didn't give them a full or complete picture. But neither did Lawson. So their solution was to have one system to enter their actual time, costs, and completion estimates for all their projects, both in Project Server and those in Lawson, and integrated into both systems. This also gave them one place to view true resource availability. If they went to assign someone to a task from Project Server, they could now see that they were fully allocated on a project over in Lawson and therefore unavailable during that time. Previously, they would have seen the person as available. They would get the assignment and actually be over-allocated. The whining would begin, and of course for good reason. So the answer is yes, Project Server can address many of those issues, but you really need to take a hard look at it. Make sure you're able to get the big picture view and able to see everything holistically. So to bring it all back together, Project and Project Server are great tools for planning your projects, but it's very difficult to enter, track, and manage work time actuals and get true resource allocation views with any level of detail. Detailed, scheduled, and Gantt charts are pretty, but altogether they're useless if you don't know important factors such as who's available to work. Are these estimates and deadlines realistic? Has the team member completed the task that he or she is still working on? Integrating Project and Project Server with some sort of solution that gives you actual time and cost tracking, completion estimates, resource management, and detailed reporting provides you with just that information. Don't just look at a picture of how you want the project to be, but get a view of how it really is so you can step in and fix things when necessary. Don't just use a map, use navigation. Well, now we'd like to get to your questions, and it'll take us just a second or two here to wrap them all up and get them organized. While we're doing that, I'd like to mention that the solution that we were using to illustrate some of the ways to extend Project and Project Server is called Journyx Project Execute. And if you'd like some more information on the Project Execute solution, we'll put up some contact info and tell you how you can find out more. With that, I will turn it back over to Ashton.
Thank you, James. I'll now be opening up the Q&A portion of our presentation. If you haven't done so already, please submit your questions via the Questions tab. James, our first question today comes from Bill. He asks, you mentioned that tracking time is important. Do you have advice on how to put this process in place for someone who is not currently doing so?
Sure, Bill. That's a great question. You know, I do definitely recommend tracking your actual time against your tasks. If you're not doing that now, don't be afraid of it. It's a process that you can put into place. There's a couple of things you might want to keep in mind. First, you want to make the process approachable and adoptable by your team members. You know, it's going to represent change in the organization. Change is always difficult, but don't fret about it. Just handle it correctly. What I recommend is whatever tool you're going to be using to track time, and of course I do suggest using an automated tool if you can, rather than Excel that doesn't have auditing and controls built in, and it's not in real time. But whatever you do, make sure it's a flexible interface that makes it easy for them to go in and put the information in and not a big intrusion on their day. And if this is a new process for you, Bill, you might start out lightly, like by tracking only project level, and then comparing your actuals at the project level to those of your estimates. And then in time, you can grow into it. You can become a little more mature in the process and get down to tracking time at the task level so you can manage and track at that level. So the first thing I'd recommend, Bill, is having an adoptable process that's easy to implement, doesn't take up too much time for your people to go in and get it done. My rule of thumb is this, that if it takes your people longer to tell you how much they don't like tracking their time than it does for them to actually do it, you're on the right track. And then the second thing I would mention is, in my opinion, is probably more important, is to have a lot of transparency into what you're doing. You know, some of the resistance you're going to get is, you know, why do we need to do this? I'm a salaried employee. This seems a lot like Big Brother. Why do you need to know what I'm working on? You know, explain to your employees that this is not being used as a policing mechanism. It's more to facilitate our project execution process and help us as managers help you, the resources, to do your job better, because then we'll have visibility to where problems occur and costs aren't in line with objectives, and we can use that data to make the entire organization more productive and more efficient. So having an easy and adoptable process and have a bunch of transparency into what you're doing, and you'll be surprised, Bill, with the results that you'll get.
Thank you, James. Our next question comes from Amy. She asks, you mentioned connecting to resource management. Can't I track resources directly within MS Project?
Amy, you can, but what I've found from our clients is that it ends up being siloed. For instance, if you're using Desktop Project, you can see how resources are utilized across that particular project plan, but you may not have visibility to other project plans throughout the organization. So if you're using a shared resource pool, you can see how those resources are allocated across multiple projects, but there may be some things that exist outside of that. The same thing applies to Project Server. Many times you'll have small projects, like I mentioned earlier, those 3-person, 3-day projects that just don't make it into your formal project schedules, or you may have some of your project managers who are utilizing some of your resources on their projects but not utilizing Microsoft Project. It may be overkill for those smaller projects to be put into Project or Project Server, and they're just not comfortable putting those in. So again, you won't have a good, true view of how those resources are allocated across multiple projects unless you're able to account for all of their work. And that's one of the ways that we talk about extending Microsoft Project, because we're able to factor in those things that might exist outside of the project schedules and see how resources are allocated across the organization and across multiple projects and multiple items of work. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, James. Our last question today comes from Steve. He asks, it looks like this could work for larger, more mature companies. Can this be something that a smaller organization can implement that doesn't have a mature process?
You sure can. I would say our customers run the gamut from being small organizations or small departments of 20 to 30 within larger companies, all the way up to hundreds or even thousands of users distributed across multiple projects. And one of the things about a tool like Project Execute, one that connects to actuals and encompasses that resource management, provides analytics, is that it enables you to take your existing infrastructure or your existing environment and put something right there in the middle and begin to wrap proven processes around it. A lot of the customers that we work with fall into the category of what I like to call the PMO of one, the person who either has been brought in or assigned to begin establishing those formal processes and methodologies. And by having something that provides you central visibility across all of your existing projects, it enables you to start building some continuity and how people do things, because now you have visibility into who's doing what and when they're going to be finished, so you can see how that impacts the entire organization. We've got many customers who confess to us that they're not very mature in their project planning methodologies, yet they implement this software because they find that they're able to increase their maturity by simply increasing visibility across the organization.
Thank you, James. Well, we've come to the end of our time today, but have more questions coming through. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this screen up for a few additional minutes. If your question has not been answered, we have your contact information, and we'll send your answer via email. Thanks again for taking time out of your busy schedules to spend with us today. I hope the content we provided today was valuable. And should you have any additional questions or would like to see a more in-depth view of our solution, Project Execute, visit our website to register for our weekly 30-minute live demo. And remember, don't just plan, execute. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.